The great crystal hall stretched out like a frozen ocean. Elena Vasquez stood at its center, her small human form dwarfed by the massive space around her. Above her, 12 beings sat on thrones that floated in the air. Each throne was different. Some glowed with soft light. Others were made of what looked like living metal. One seemed to be carved from a single black stone that hurt to look at. Elena kept her face calm, but her heart was beating fast. She had seen war. She had seen death. She had watched entire cities burn. But standing here, in front of these ancient creatures, made her feel very small. The being on the center throne spoke first. It looked like a tall, thin person, but its skin was silver and its eyes were pure white. When it moved, Elena could see through parts of its body as if it was made of mist. "Human," it said. Its voice came from everywhere at once. "You stand before the Galactic Tribunal. We are the Kethmori, and we have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We called you here to answer for your crimes." Elena said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often the best weapon. To the left of the Kethmori, another being shifted on its throne. This one was huge and covered in thick, dark armor. Red lights glowed where its eyes should be. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal. "Your species has spread like a disease," it growled. "I am Warlord Thex of the Vorthek Collective. For 5,000 years we have brought order to this galaxy. You humans refuse to accept your place." Elena looked at each of them in turn. She knew their faces. She had fought some of them. She had studied all of them. In her bag she carried files about every species represented here. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their secrets. A third voice joined the others. This one was soft and seemed to come from inside Elena's own head. The being on the third throne looked almost human, but its head was too large and its fingers were too long. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from within. "We are the ethereal hegemony," it whispered directly into Elena's mind. "For 3,000 years we have guided the younger races. We have kept peace. You humans bring only chaos." Elena finally spoke. Her voice was calm and clear in the vast hall. "You want to put me on trial," she said. "But you have already decided I am guilty. You have already decided what my punishment will be. This is not a trial. This is a show." The silver being's white eyes flashed with anger. "You dare speak to us this way? We could destroy your entire species with a thought. Then why haven't you?" Elena asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. The 12 beings looked at each other for a moment. None of them spoke. Elena had spent the last 20 years learning about these creatures. The Kethmori were old and proud. They believed they were better than everyone else because they had lived so long. The Vorthak were bullies who took what they wanted by force. The ethereals liked to control people's minds and make them think. It was their own idea, but they all had one thing in common. They were afraid. "We brought you here," said another voice, "because your species is dangerous." This speaker was different from the others. It looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and eyes that sparkled like jewels. "I am Queen Zaltar of the Hive Collective. We have watched you for 50 years. You do not follow the rules." Elena almost smiled. "What rules?" "The rules that keep order in this galaxy," Warlord Thex said. "When a new species develops space travel, they come to us. They ask permission to explore. They accept guidance from their betters. They take their place in the hierarchy. And if they don't?" Elena asked. "Then they learn the hard way," said the queen. Elena looked around the hall again. She could see the other species that served these 12 powers. They stood along the walls like guards, but Elena could see the fear in their eyes. They were not guards, they were prisoners. "You want to know why we don't follow your rules?" Elena said, "It's simple. We read the history of this galaxy. We know what happens to species that trust you." The ethereal being's mental voice became sharp and angry. "You know nothing? We have brought peace and order to billions of worlds. You have brought slavery," Elena said. "You call it peace, but it's slavery." The hall erupted in angry voices. The floating thrones moved closer to Elena, and she could Feel the power radiating from the beings on them. But she did not step back. The Kethmori, she continued, her voice cutting through the noise, you make other species dependent on your technology. Then you control them by threatening to take it away. The Vorthek, you absorb entire cultures and erase their identities. The ethereals, you get inside people's heads and make them forget who they are. Lies, roared Warlord Dex. Prove it, Elena said simply. The silver being on the center throne raised one misty hand and the hall fell silent. You will not disrupt this tribunal with your wild accusations, it said. You are here to answer charges, not make them. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. Several of the beings on the thrones tensed, but she just set it on the floor in front of her. This is a recording device, she said. I want everything we say here to be preserved. I want the galaxy to hear this conversation. That is not permitted, said Queen Zeltar. Why not? Elena asked. If you are as just and fair as you claim, why not let everyone hear what happens here? The 12 beings looked at each other again. Elena could see them communicating in ways she could not hear or understand. Finally, the silver being spoke. Very well. But you will answer our charges. Your species has violated the Galactic Peace Accords. You have interfered with established trade relationships. You have encouraged rebellion among the subject races. How do you answer these charges? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I need to ask you something first. How many species lived in this galaxy before you took control? That is not relevant, said the ethereal. I think it is, Elena said. Because I know the answer. There were millions of different species, each with their own culture, their own technology, their own way of life. Now there are hundreds. What happened to the others? They were absorbed into the greater community, said Warlord Dex. They became part of something larger than themselves. They died, Elena said. Their languages died, their art died, their music died, their dreams died. You killed them all, and you call it peace. The hall was very quiet now. Elena could hear her own breathing. Your species will learn, said the silver being. You will accept your place, or you will be made to accept it. Elena looked up at the floating thrones, at the ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for so long, at the creatures who thought they were gods. No, she said. We won't. The simple words seemed to echo in the crystal hall forever. You speak for your entire species? Asked Queen Zeltar. Elena straightened her shoulders. I speak for all of humanity, and for everyone else who is tired of being afraid. The trial was about to begin. The silver being waved its hand, and the air above Elena began to shimmer. Images appeared like ghosts made of light. Elena recognized the first one immediately. It was Earth, but not as it looked now. This was Earth 50 years ago, when the first alien ships had arrived? We will show the tribunal what your species truly is, the Kethmori said. We will show them why you must be stopped. The image changed. Elena saw human cities burning. She saw people running in panic as strange ships filled the sky. But she also saw something else. She saw humans fighting back. She saw them studying the alien technology even as their world was being attacked. When we first encountered your species, the silver being continued, you were primitives. You had barely learned to leave your own planet. We offered you guidance. We offered you a place in our civilization. Elena watched the images play out above her. She remembered these events differently, but she said nothing. Not yet. You refused our generous offer, said Warlord Dex. His red eyes glowed brighter as he spoke. Instead, you stole our technology. You reverse-engineered our ships. You learned our secrets. The images showed human scientists working frantically in underground labs. They were taking apart pieces of alien ships, learning how they worked. Elena had been one of those scientists back when she was young and the war was just beginning. That was not theft, Elena said quietly. That was survival. You broke the natural order, said Queen Zeltar. New species are supposed to accept guidance from their elders. They are supposed to learn their place. Elena looked up at the floating thrones. And what place did you have in mind for us? The ethereal being's voice whispered in her head. You would have been workers, miners, soldiers when we needed them. It is an honorable role. Slaves, Elena said. You mean slaves? The images above her head changed again. Now she saw other worlds, other species. She watched the Kethmori arrive. At a planet full of people who looked like tall, thin birds. The bird people were excited to meet aliens from the stars. They welcomed the Kethmori with celebrations and gifts. Elena watched as the Kethmori offered the bird people wonderful technology, machines that could heal any disease, ships that could travel between stars, computers that could solve any problem. We brought them into the galactic community, the silver being said proudly. We lifted them up from their primitive existence. But Elena saw what happened next. The bird people became dependent on Kethmori technology. When they tried to make their own improvements, the machines stopped working. When they asked questions about how things functioned, they were told it was too complicated for them to understand. Within a generation, the bird people had forgotten how to make anything for themselves. They were completely dependent on their Kethmori masters. This is what we offer, the silver being said. Order, structure, purpose. Elena had seen this pattern before. She had studied it for years. The Kethmori did not conquer with weapons. They conquered with kindness. They made other species need them so badly that freedom became impossible. The images changed again. Now Elena saw the Vorthik in action. They were different from the Kethmori. They did not offer gifts or make promises. They simply took what they wanted. She watched Vorthik ships surround a peaceful world. The people there had green skin and multiple arms. They lived in beautiful crystal cities and made art that could sing. The Zelani were a stubborn species, Warlord Thek said. They refused to join the collective voluntarily. So we taught them the value of unity. Elena watched in silence as the Vorthek landed on the crystal world. They did not destroy the cities or kill the people. Instead, they did something worse. They began to change them. The Vorthak had technology that could alter minds, rewrite memories, reshape personalities. Elena watched as the green-skinned people were taken one by one into Vorthik facilities. When they came out, they were different. They still looked the same, but their eyes were empty. Their singing art became silent. Their individual personalities merged into one collective voice. Unity is strength, Warlord Thek said. Individual desires create conflict. We removed the source of conflict. You erased them, Elena said. You kept their bodies but killed their souls. We improved them, the warlord replied. They are part of something greater now. Elena had met Zelani survivors. There were not many left, but some had escaped before the Vorthik transformation was complete. They lived in hiding now, terrified that someone would discover their true identity and drag them back for processing. The images shifted once more. Now, Elena saw the ethereal hegemony at work. Their methods were more subtle than the others, but just as deadly. She watched as ethereal ships approached a world full of people who looked almost human, except for their blue skin and large eyes. The ethereals did not offer technology like the Kethmori. They did not use force like the Vorthek. Instead, they offered wisdom. The Nilori were a species with great potential, the ethereal being said. Its mental voice was soft and soothing. But they were troubled by doubt, by fear, by the chaos of individual thought. We helped them find peace. Elena watched as ethereal teachers spread across the blue world. They taught meditation, philosophy, and mental discipline. The blue-skinned people were eager to learn. They gathered in great halls to listen to ethereal wisdom, but Elena could see what was really happening. The ethereals were not teaching. They were programming. Each lesson, each meditation session, each philosophical discussion was designed to make the blue people more dependent on ethereal guidance. Gradually, the Nilori stopped making their own decisions. When faced with any choice, they would ask their ethereal teachers what to do. When they had problems, they would seek ethereal solutions. When they had dreams, they would ask for ethereal approval. Within 2 generations, the Nilori had become a species of followers. They could not think for themselves anymore. They did not want to think for themselves. The very idea of independence had become frightening to them. We brought them clarity, the ethereal said. We freed them from the burden of choice. Elena felt sick watching the images. She had seen the results of ethereal teaching on other worlds. Entire species who had forgotten how to be curious, how to question, how to dream of something better. This is your idea of civilization? Elena asked. Slavery wrapped in pretty words? This is order, said the silver being. This is peace. Your species disrupts this peace wherever you go. The images above Elena's head changed one final time. Now she saw humans arriving at worlds that had been conquered by the tribunal species. She watched human ships land on the bird people's world, on the crystal cities of the few remaining Zelani, on the blue planet of the Nilori, but what the tribunal showed as evidence of human crimes, Elena saw differently. She watched human engineers working alongside the bird people, teaching them how to build their own technology. She saw human doctors helping Zelani refugees recover their stolen memories. She saw human teachers showing the Nilori that it was okay to ask questions, to disagree, to think for themselves. Your species is a virus, Queen Zeltar said. Wherever you go, you spread chaos and rebellion. Elena looked up at the 12 floating thrones, at the beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through fear and control. You're right, she said quietly. We do spread something wherever we go. The tribunal members leaned forward, thinking they had finally gotten her to admit her crimes. We spread the idea that slavery is wrong, Elena continued. We spread the idea that every species has the right to choose its own path. We spread the idea that no one has the right to own another person's mind or soul. You spread chaos, Warlord Dex roared. We spread freedom, Elena said. And you can't stand it because once people taste freedom, they never want to go back to being slaves. The crystal hall fell silent. The images above Elena's head flickered and died. You see? The silver being said to the other tribunal members, this is exactly what we warned you about. They corrupt everything they touch with their primitive ideas about individual liberty. Elena smiled for the first time since entering the hall. Individual? Liberty. You say that like it's a disease. It is, the ethereal whispered in her mind. It is the disease that destroys civilizations. No, Elena said. It's the cure for tyrants. The trial was about to get much more interesting. Elena reached into her bag again. This time, she pulled out a small communication device. The 12 beings on their floating thrones watched her carefully. What are you doing? The silver being demanded. I'm calling witnesses, Elena said simply. This tribunal does not recognize your right to call witnesses, Queen Zeltar said. Her jeweled eyes flashed with anger. Then you're not really interested in justice, are you? Elena replied. She activated the device. The air in the crystal hall began to shimmer again, but this time Elena was controlling the images. A face appeared in the light above her head. It belonged to one of the bird people she had seen in the tribunal's evidence, but this bird person looked different from the ones in the Kethmori images. His feathers were bright and colorful, his eyes were alert and intelligent. Most importantly, he was smiling. My name is Crix, the bird person said. I speak for the Free Aviaran Republic. We were once slaves of the Kethmori, now we are free. The silver being's white eyes blazed with fury. This is not permitted. You cannot let him speak, Elena said calmly, unless you're afraid of what he might say. Crix continued as if he had not been interrupted. For 300 years my people served the Kethmori. We thought we were lucky. They gave us wonderful machines. They solved our problems. They took care of us. Elena watched the tribunal members shift uncomfortably on their thrones. But we were not free, Crix said. We could not make our own choices. We could not build our own future. We were children forever, dependent on our masters for everything. You were protected, the silver being protested. You were safe? You were happy? We were prisoners, Crix replied. We just didn't know it yet. The bird person's image changed. showing scenes of his world now. Elena could see Aviaran engineers building their own ships, Aviaran scientists making new discoveries, Aviaran artists creating works of beauty that sang with freedom. The humans came to our world 20 years ago, Crix continued. They did not offer to save us. They did not promise to take care of us. Instead, they taught us something more valuable. They taught us how to save ourselves. Elena smiled as she watched the tribunal members' faces. They were starting to look worried. The humans showed us how the Kethmori machines really worked, Crix said. They helped us understand that we could build our own technology. Better technology, technology that belonged to us. The image of Crix faded and another face appeared. This one belonged to a Zelani, one of the green-skinned people the Vorthak had tried to absorb into their collective. But this Zelani's eyes were bright with individual thought. I am Vessel who was lost, she said. That is the name the Vorthak gave me when they tried to erase who I was, but I remember my real name now. I am Serene of the Crystal Valleys. Warlord Dex leaned forward, on his throne, his red eyes burning. Impossible. You were processed. You were made perfect. I was made empty, Serene replied. The humans helped me find myself again. Elena watched as Serene told her story. How human doctors had developed techniques to restore stolen memories. How human counselors had helped Zelani refugees remember who they used to be. How human engineers had helped them rebuild their crystal cities stronger and more beautiful than before. The Vorthak told us that individual thought was weakness, Serene said. The humans showed us that individual thought is the source of all strength. More faces appeared in the shimmering air. A blue-skinned Nalori who had learned to think for himself again. A representative of the Corvani, whose world had been strip-mined by the hegemony until humans helped them reclaim it. Delegates from dozens of species that Elena had never mentioned before. Each one told the same story: oppression, slavery, then contact with humans, then freedom. Stop this, Queen Zeltar demanded. These are lies. These beings are confused. They do not understand what they are saying. They understand perfectly, Elena said. They understand that freedom is better than slavery. The ethereal being's mental voice grew sharp and angry. You have poisoned their minds with your primitive concepts. One of the witnesses, a tall being, with silver skin and 4 arms, laughed at that. The ethereals say we are poisoned because we think for ourselves now. They preferred us when we were too afraid to have our own opinions. Elena looked around the crystal hall. She could see the other species that served the tribunal, the ones standing along the walls like guards. They were listening to every word. She could see doubt beginning to grow in their eyes. Do you want to know what humans really do when they meet a new species? Elena asked the tribunal. We don't offer them gifts with strings attached. We don't try to control their minds. We don't promise to solve all their problems for them. She paused, letting her words sink in. We offer them something much more dangerous, she continued. We offer them a choice. The silver being stood up from its floating throne. Elena had never seen a Kethmori look so angry. Choice leads to chaos, it said. Choice leads to conflict. Choice leads to war. Sometimes, Elena agreed. But it also leads to growth. It leads to discovery. It leads to becoming more than you were before. Another witness appeared in the air above Elena's head. This one was different from the others. It was small and furry, with large eyes and delicate hands. Elena recognized it as one of the Pip, a species that had never been conquered by any of the tribunal powers. I am Squeaker of Truth, the small being said. My people have watched the great powers of this galaxy for a long time. We stayed hidden because we were afraid. But the humans found us anyway. Elena remembered first contact. With the Pip, they had been terrified, expecting humans to enslave them like all the other powerful species did. The humans could have taken our world easily, Squeaker of Truth continued. We had no weapons, we had no defenses. But they did not take anything from us. Instead, they gave us something we had never had before. What did they give you? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Hope, the small being said. They showed us that the galaxy did not have to be ruled by fear. They showed us that small species could be free too. Elena could see the effect these words were having on the tribunal's servants. The guards along the walls were whispering to each other. Some of them had tears in their eyes. This is propaganda. Warlord Thex roared. These are lies designed to undermine galactic stability. No, said a new voice. This time it came from inside the crystal hall itself. One of the guards along the wall had stepped forward. Elena could see that he belonged to a species she didn't recognize, with blue-gray skin and tentacles instead of hair. I am 10th Circle Swimming, the guard said. I serve the ethereal hegemony. I have served them for 40 years. The ethereal being's mental voice turned cold and threatening. Return to your position immediately. But 10th Circle Swimming did not move. I have listened to these testimonies. I have heard these beings speak of freedom, and I realize that I do not remember the last time I made a choice for myself. Elena could feel the tension in the hall rising. Other guards were looking at each other, questioning looks in their eyes. I remember having dreams when I was young, 10th Circle Swimming continued. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to create beautiful things. But my ethereal teachers told me that such desires were selfish. They taught me that serving others was more noble than following my own path. The guard looked up at the floating thrones with something Elena had never expected to see in this hall: defiance. But listening to these witnesses, I wonder, he said. What if my teachers were wrong? What if my dreams were not selfish? What if serving others and following my own path could be the same thing? Elena watched as more guards stepped forward. Beings from dozens of different species, all of them servants of the tribunal powers. All of them beginning to ask the same dangerous question: what if we could be free? This ends now, the silver being shrieked. Its voice echoed through the crystal hall like breaking glass. Guards, arrest the human! Execute her for sedition! But the guards did not move. They stood in the center of the hall, looking up at their masters with new eyes. Elena looked up at the 12 floating thrones, at the beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, at the creatures who thought they were gods. You want to know what humans really are? She said. We're not conquerors. We're not destroyers. We're not even particularly special. She gestured to the guards surrounding her, to the witnesses still speaking in the air above her head, to the countless beings across the galaxy who were listening to this broadcast. We're just the first species that said no to you, Elena continued. And once we said it, everyone else realized they could say it too. The crystal hall erupted in chaos as the truth finally sank in. The age of the great powers was ending, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Elena stood calmly in the center of the storm, waiting for what would come next. The chaos in the crystal hall lasted for several minutes. The 12 beings on their floating thrones were shouting orders that no one was following. The guards stood in the center of the room, no longer willing to obey their masters. The witnesses continued to speak from the shimmering air above Elena's head. Their voices growing stronger and more confident. Elena waited. She had one more card to play, and timing was everything. Finally, the silver being managed to restore some order. The floating thrones moved closer together, and Elena could see the tribunal members having a quick, silent conversation. When they finished, the Kethmori leader looked down at her with pure hatred. Enough, it said. We have heard enough of your lies and manipulation. This tribunal finds humanity guilty of all charges. The sentence is extinction. Elena nodded as if she had expected this. Before you carry out that sentence, she said, I have one more piece of evidence to present. We will hear no more of your propaganda, Queen Zeltar said. This isn't propaganda, Elena replied. This is documentation. She reached into her bag one final time and pulled out a small data device. It looked innocent enough, but Elena could see several of the tribunal members tense when they saw it. For the past 50 years, Elena said, humanity has been exploring this galaxy. We've visited thousands of worlds. We've met hundreds of species, and everywhere we went we kept records. She activated the device and new images began to appear. in the air above her head. But these were not testimonies or stories. These were files, documents, recordings, evidence. We documented everything, Elena continued. Every slave world, every broken treaty, every species that mysteriously disappeared, every world that was strip-mined until nothing was left. The first document showed a Kethmori trade agreement. Elena had seen many like it. They always looked fair on the surface, but buried in the complex language were clauses that gave the Kethmori complete control over the other species' economy. This is a standard Kethmori trade contract, Elena explained. It looks like an equal partnership. But look at Section 47, subsection 12. The relevant text appeared highlighted in the document. It was written in language so complex that most species wouldn't understand it, but the meaning was clear. The Kethmori could cut off all trade at any time, for any reason. And when they did, the other species would have no way to survive. 43 species have signed contracts like this, Elena said. All of them are now completely dependent on Kethmori technology. All of them are slaves in everything but name. The silver being's white eyes blazed with fury. Those are confidential documents. How did you keep listening? Elena said. The next set of files showed Vorthek processing centers. Elena had seen these facilities on several worlds. They looked like hospitals from the outside, but inside they were factories for destroying mines. The Vorthek claim they only process species that volunteer for collective consciousness, Elena said, but we found the real records. The documents showed quotas. Each Vorthek facility was required to process a certain number of beings every month. If they didn't meet their quotas, they would lose funding. If a species refused to volunteer, accidents would happen, food shipments would be delayed, power plants would malfunction, diseases would spread. The Vorthek create the problems, Elena explained, then offer collective consciousness as the solution. They make species so desperate that joining the collective seems like salvation. Warlord Thex stood up from his throne, his massive armored form towering over Elena. You have no right to those files. We have every right, Elena replied. Because you used those techniques on us too. You just didn't expect us to survive long enough to document them. The final set of documents showed the ethereal hegemony's psychological manipulation programs. Elena had studied these files for years, and they still made her sick. The ethereals didn't just control minds, they studied them. They experimented on them. They had detailed psychological profiles of every species in the galaxy, with specific instructions on how to break their will to resist. The ethereals don't teach wisdom, Elena said. They teach dependency. Every meditation technique, every philosophical lesson, every piece of guidance is designed to make other species unable to think for themselves. The documents showed the results of these programs. Species that had once been curious and creative became passive and obedient. Scientists stopped asking questions. Artists stopped creating new things. Children stopped dreaming of the future. You turned entire civilizations into cattle, Elena said. Feeling cattle that believed they were free. The ethereal being's mental voice was no longer smooth and soothing. It was sharp and desperate. You do not understand. Order must be maintained. Without guidance, species destroy themselves. Maybe, Elena agreed, but that should be their choice to make. She activated another function on her device, and the images above her head changed again. Now they showed star maps, hundreds of them, thousands of them. This is what we really found when we explored the galaxy, Elena said. Not just evidence of your crimes, but evidence of what this galaxy used to be. The star map showed civilizations that no longer existed. Worlds that had once been full of life, now empty. Species that had once reached for the stars, now extinct. Before you brought order to this galaxy, Elena continued, there were millions of different species. Each one had their own culture, their own technology, their own dreams. They traded with each other, they learned from each other. They sometimes fought with each other, but they were alive. Elena looked up at the 12 floating thrones. Now there are fewer than 1,000 species left, and most of them are your slaves. The silver being's voice was shaking with rage. Those species were primitive. They were chaotic. They were destroying themselves. Some of them probably were, Elena admitted. But you didn't save them. You absorbed them. You erased them. You turned a galaxy full of infinite possibilities into a prison with 12 guards. Elena activated the final function on her device. Suddenly, the crystal hall was filled with new voices. Not just the witnesses who had been speaking before, but thousands of new voices. Millions of them. What is this? Queen Zeltar demanded. This is the galaxy waking up, Elena said. The voices belonged to beings all across the galaxy. Species that had been hidden away on forgotten worlds. Slaves who had never spoken their true thoughts out loud. Children who had been taught to never ask questions, but now they were all speaking at once. And they were all saying the same thing. We want to be free. Elena could see panic beginning to show on the faces of the tribunal members. This wasn't just a trial anymore. This was a revolution. And it was happening on every world they controlled. You wanted to know what humanity's real crime was? Elena asked. It wasn't spreading chaos. It wasn't corrupting innocent species. It wasn't refusing to follow your rules. She gestured to the thousands of voices filling the crystal hall too. The guards who had abandoned their posts, to the witnesses who were still speaking of freedom. Our real crime was showing everyone else that you're not gods, Elena said. You're just bullies, and bullies can be stopped. The silver being was no longer trying to maintain its dignity. Impossible. Our fleets control every system. Our technology is superior. Our power is absolute. Elena smiled. Your fleets are crewed by the same species you've been oppressing for thousands of years. Your technology was built by slaves who now remember how to think for themselves. And your power was always just an illusion. She looked around the crystal hall one more time, at the chaos, at the fear in the tribunal members' eyes, at the hope growing in everyone else. Did you really think, Elena asked, that you could keep entire civilizations enslaved forever just by convincing them they had no choice? The answer came from the voices filling the hall, from the billions of beings across the galaxy who were finally speaking their truth. We have a choice, they said together. We choose freedom. Elena watched as the last illusion of the tribunals. Power crumbled around them. The great crystal hall, which had seemed so magnificent and intimidating when she first entered, now looked like what it really was: an empty shell. A monument to a dying age. The reckoning had begun. The voices of 1 billion worlds filled the crystal hall. Elena stood in the center of it all, listening to the sound of an entire galaxy choosing freedom. Around her, the former guards of the tribunal were helping each other, sharing stories, making plans. Above her, the 12 beings on their floating thrones looked smaller than they had just hours before. The silver being tried one last time to restore order. Silence, it screamed. We command you to be silent. But no one was listening anymore. Elena looked up at the Kethmori leader. Your commands don't work when people stop believing in your authority. We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy, Queen Zeltar said. Her jeweled eyes were dim now, as if the light was going out of them. We have maintained order for thousands of years. You maintained control, Elena corrected. That's not the same thing as order. Warlord Dex stood up from his throne, his massive form still intimidating even in defeat. Your revolution will fail, he growled. Without us, the galaxy will tear itself apart. Species will go to war. Worlds will burn. Chaos will consume everything, Elena nodded thoughtfully. You might be right, she said. Freedom is messy. Freedom is dangerous. Some species might make terrible mistakes. Some worlds might choose badly. She paused, looking around the hall at all the beings who had chosen to stand with her. But that's their choice to make, she continued. And maybe, just maybe, they'll surprise you. Maybe they'll build something better than what you gave them. The ethereal being's mental voice was weak now, barely a whisper in Elena's mind. You do not understand what you have done. The peace we created, was built on slavery, Elena interrupted. Peace that requires chains isn't peace at all, it's just fear wearing a pretty mask. Elena activated her communication device one more time. New images appeared in the air above her head, but these weren't documents or testimonies. These were live feeds from across the galaxy. She could see Kethmori trade stations being abandoned as their slave workers simply walked away. Vorthek. Processing centers shutting down as their staff refused to continue the mind-breaking work. Ethereal teaching facilities emptying as students chose to think for themselves, but Elena could also see something else. Something the tribunal members weren't expecting. She could see the freed species helping each other on the bird people's world. Aviaran engineers were sharing their newly rediscovered technology with refugees from other conquered worlds. In the crystal cities of the Zalani, former collective drones were learning to be individuals again with help from counselors of dozens of different species. "Look," Elena said, pointing to the images, "your slaves aren't tearing each other apart. They're working together?" The silver being's voice was hollow now. "This is temporary. Without our guidance, they will remember their old hatreds. They will fall back into primitive conflicts." "Maybe," Elena said again, "but look closer." She zoomed in on one of the images. It showed a meeting between representatives of 5 different species. Elena recognized some of them. A bird person from the Avian Republic, a green-skinned Zalani, a blue Nilori who had learned to think for himself, a small furry pip, and a tall insectoid being from a species Elena didn't know. "They're not falling back into old patterns," Elena observed. "They're creating new ones." The beings in the image were signing something. Elena couldn't read the document from this distance, but she knew what it probably was. A mutual defense pact, a trade agreement, a promise to help each other stay free. "They're learning," Elena said softly. "They're learning that freedom isn't something you take. It's something you share." More images appeared, more meetings, more species choosing to work together instead of fight. Elena watched as former enemies became allies, united by their shared experience of oppression and their shared hope for something better. "This is impossible," the silver being whispered. "Species are naturally competitive. They naturally seek dominance over others." "Some do," Elena agreed. "But not all? And even the competitive ones can learn that cooperation is more profitable than conquest." She looked up at the floating thrones one more time, at the beings who had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten any other way existed. "You want to know the real difference between humans and you?" Elena asked. "When we met species that were different from us, we didn't immediately try to control them. We tried to understand them. We tried to learn from them." Elena gestured to the chaos around her, to the voices of freedom echoing through the hall. "And when we found species that were being oppressed, we didn't try to replace their oppressors," she continued. "We tried to help them free themselves." A communication device in Elena's hand chimed softly. She looked at it and smiled. "I'm getting reports from across the galaxy," she said. "Your fleets are standing down. Not because they're being defeated in battle, but because their crews are joining the revolution." Elena could see the truth of her words in the tribunal members' faces. Their empire was collapsing not from external attack, but from internal awakening. "It turns out," Elena continued, "that when you build your power structure on the labor of slaves, and those slaves suddenly remember they have a choice, your power structure falls apart pretty quickly." Queen Zeltara's throne began to descend toward the floor. Elena could see that the insectoid queen was no longer trying to maintain her position of superiority. "What happens now?" the queen asked. Her voice was small and tired. Elena considered the question seriously. "That depends on you," she said. "You can keep trying to hold on to power that no longer exists. You can spend your remaining years fighting a war you've already lost." She paused, looking at each of the tribunal members in turn. "Or you can do something you've never done before," Elena continued. "You can ask for forgiveness. You can try to make amends. You can spend your remaining years helping to build the free galaxy you tried so hard to prevent." The silver being laughed bitterly. "Forgiveness? From the species we ruled, they will want revenge. Some will, Elena admitted. Some species will want to make you pay for every year of slavery, every mind that was broken, every culture that was erased. Elena walked closer to the descending thrones, looking up at the beings who had seemed so powerful just hours before. But others will choose mercy, she said. Others will choose to focus on building the future instead of punishing the past. And if you're smart, you'll throw yourselves on the mercy of the forgiving ones. Warlord Dex's red eyes dimmed as his throne touched the floor. And humanity? What role will your species play in this new galaxy? Elena smiled. The same role we've always played. We'll be there when people need help learning to be free. We'll share what we know about resisting oppression. We'll document the truth and make sure it doesn't get buried again. She looked around the Crystal Hall one more time, at the former guards who were now making plans for their own futures, at the witnesses who were still speaking of hope and freedom, at the ruins of an empire built on lies. But we won't rule, Elena said firmly, because the whole point of this revolution is that no one species should have the power to rule all. The others? The ethereal being's mental voice was barely audible now. What if the galaxy descends into chaos? What if species destroy themselves without guidance? Elena shrugged. Then that's their choice to make. Freedom includes the freedom to fail. She began walking toward the exit of the Crystal Hall, her work here finally done. But I don't think they will fail, she called back over her shoulder. I think they're going to build something amazing, something none of us can imagine yet. Elena paused at the doorway and looked back one final time. You called us victims when we arrived, broken and scattered from our dying world, she said. You expected us to bow, to accept our place in your order, but we were never victims. Her voice carried across the hall, strong and clear. We were the storm you never saw coming. We were the reckoning you brought upon yourselves. And now the storm is everywhere, and the reckoning belongs to everyone. Elena walked out of the Crystal Hall and into a galaxy that was finally, truly, free. Behind her, the age of empires built on fear came to an end. Ahead of her, something new was about to begin.